I think they may have accidentally made competitive Pokemon smaller.
This and last year are probably some of the easiest years that we've ever had as far as getting a Worlds invite.
Evolving our competitive structure is an ongoing process, and we value our community's sentiment and suggestions. In the meantime, please keep providing. Usually, I don't make news videos, but this is a big one. June 27th, TPCi announced an absolutely giant change to the 2025 competitive Pokemon circuit. By far, the biggest thing is that instead of a hard point goal you need to reach to qualify, a set end for the Pokemon World Championships, instead, now you have to be amongst the top 75 players in your region in terms of points to qualify, drastically reducing the amount of players who are going to qualify for the Pokemon World Championships. There's a lot to go over in this document, honestly, and a lot of far-reaching implications, so I enlisted the help of some friends. Dan Fitzpatrick, who top 16 the Hartford Regional Championships, Justin Karras, who top 8 at Worlds in 2016 and won the 2023 Charlotte Regional Championships, and Toller Webb, who's won the Pokemon World Championship in the Senior Division and won the Knoxville Regional Championship earlier this year. We sat down to discuss these changes, and here's how it went. We are here to talk about the same thing everyone else has been talking about the last 8 hours. For those who don't know, they recently released the new organized play document for the 2025 Pokemon World Championship season for Pokemon Go, TCG, and, as is important for all of us, VGC. If you're on this channel, you probably know who I am, otherwise how'd you get here? My name is Jacob, I'm Scraw, and joining me today I have Justin Karras, I have
What's up, man?
Webb,
Hello.
and I have Dan Fitzpatrick.
Hello.
So today we're gonna have a little list of things about the organized play document that are a little controversial. We're gonna talk about them. A lot of them people are skeptical about, to say the least. Some good things, you know, it's not always all bad. So we're going to get into it. So let's start by addressing the elephant in the room. For the last several years, the way qualifying for Worlds has worked is that there is a set bar of points you must earn. That bar is not influenced by how many people achieve that goal. It's just a static goal. Think of it almost like getting your 8 gym badges in the video game. But now it has changed where it is no longer about how many points you get, period, but about how many points you get compared to other players in your region. Moving forward, there is a set cap for each region for Pokemon Organized Play of players that can qualify for the World Championships. So the top 75 players, for example, in North America will qualify for the World Championship. But if you are 76th on that leaderboard, you will not qualify. Now, this used to be the way the series worked. Justin and Toller, I know you two were playing during that time. So why don't we start with you two? Justin, why don't you start us off and tell us a little bit about how different the circuit was. Last time we had a static number of players that could qualify.
Well, obviously there's a ton of differences, with how tournament play operates in general. For example, we have open information now. We have day 2 Swiss. There's a lot more stability in your play, and you can be more consistent. I think things that have changed over the last 2-3 years specifically have added to the ability for players to just be more consistent, do the long game of get your points, practice, play at a couple tournaments, get over the bar, the championship point bar. But back in the day, we were fighting over a lot fewer invites. And it was even more surprising because I think that it went from 16 invites in North America in 2014 to, I think it was just 16, to 40 invites. And then they added the bar. So it was top 40 in North America in 2015. And then in 2016, it was very, very different. It was probably the most accessible season we had ever had, maybe in contention with 2024. The bar was about 350, and they did carry over a couple things from that season that I think they implemented in a different way, maybe not to our benefit. But for an example, there's certain BFL things that are shared. Back in 2016, your mid-season points were actually shared with your regionals. So if you had 3 firsts at a midseason, they awarded 90 something points, and that would usually outpace your regional placements, especially if you weren't good at best of 1 like me. And if you didn't have a chance to go to a lot of tournaments and didn't pop off at a lot of them either. And a lot of people still welcome that change. People welcome the 2015 change in comparison to 2014, going from 16 to 40 invites. But obviously now it feels like a step backwards, even though we do have more invites on the limited scale. And there's just a bunch of adjustments that we're going to be going into. I know that playing back then, it was a lot more, again, it was different. I still would take the format that we have now over what we had in 2015, even if they had 75 invites back then, because again, no best of 1 Swiss. We have best of 3 Swiss. We have open information with open team sheets. a lot more stability in the Swiss, the day two Swiss metrics. So yeah, it's a much different game, but Toller could probably tell you like he was really in the weeds back when it was way rougher.
Yeah, I qualified by top X qualification, both 2014 and 2015. 2013, I went to Worlds, but that was off of auto qualification from winning Seniors Worlds, so that was a little different. Yes, I was just going back and looking over the 2014 results. I qualified, I think, last in the U.S. I qualified as the 19th invitation, according to Nugget Bridge. How will I put this? Top X qualification systems are frustrating to play in some ways. In some ways, it's fine, right? Because well, back then, right, there was a pretty clear stratification between people who knew what they were doing and could reasonably qualify, and people that probably wouldn't. We didn't have as many new players that knew what they were doing, and I mean this like new EVs, new IVs, like basic stuff, not adding strategic fundamentals or anything like that. It wasn't amazingly hard to get an invite if you had the level of experience I had at that point, but I mean, looking at this list of names, like there are very few people on this list that were not considered exceptional at the time. So I guess one thing that a top X system does is puts in a lot of good players, but also a lot of really good players at the time missed the invite. And it was very dramatic and very stressful to kind of consider. Like I know Simon Yip literally quit because he missed it by one placing 2 years in a row. And if there had just been a bar, then he would have known whether he was getting it before NAIC. But in both cases, he lost the invite. I don't remember being able to wallet warrior very much. I was very young. I was always on the lower end of standings, so they couldn't do that sort of thing. And I didn't have any big international or national placements until 2015. But and we didn't have the international system that we had back then too. So there's a lot different, right? Like it was mostly about regional performances and then how do you do at Nats? And that basically determined your invite. With the international system, you can go and play in 3 Nats, and they're all bigger than regionals. And there's still the drama of like, oh, the people in the 70 to 80th range, which would probably be where I would be, get to all hate each other for arbitrary reasons because of an arbitrary cutoff set on like how many of the best players in the country are allowed to play at Worlds.
Well, let me pull on one thread here, and maybe Dan, since you haven't had a chance to speak yet, you can offer your opinions on this first. So there was quite a few times just there, Toller, where you talked about this idea of, well, we know the best players are getting in, and even some of the best players aren't getting in because there just isn't enough room for all the good players. So a very common sentiment, not one I think anybody in this call agrees with, to my understanding, unless somebody wants to have a big reveal right here, is that people were saying that they thought it was a little too easy to qualify for Worlds this year. We had the largest amount of players qualify for Worlds by a rather wide margin, I believe, this year compared to any other year. Well, while some people would say that's because the game's popularity kind of, popped off, especially during COVID-19, others would say it was too easy. So, Dan, I guess the question I want you to start off with, of course anyone can get in here in this, is what do you think their reason for shrinking the Worlds invites were? Was it too easy? Is there some other reason why they might want to make Worlds smaller?
So I would assume their reason is purely logistical. Maybe not purely, but I'd say that's probably one of the bigger reasons, just because like they are a company. They have a tournament to run. They have to book a convention center, hire staff, etc. 12 months, well, probably more than 12 months. I don't know when exactly they're doing all this, X months out. And a top 75 bar gives them a lot of certainty. Obviously, technically, they can't give the exact number because of you get extra invites for regional winners and EUIC and IC top fours, but it gives them a lot of certainty. Whether it was too easy to qualify, I didn't qualify, so what can I say? But it's like I don't know, too easy is. It was not like super easy, but maybe it was easier in the past. I don't know. I don't have the experience to know whether it was too easy. I wouldn't say so, but maybe someone else would have a different opinion. But I don't really think that's necessarily the main reason why they did this. I think it's mostly logistical. Now, if by making it smaller, it also makes it more prestigious. It makes Worlds more what it is in other games, where it's like I mean, anything that's harder to get to is therefore more valued. Like you feel better about getting it. So I think that may be part of it. But I think from like TPCi's perspective, it's probably mostly a matter of just we get to plan our event easier. We get to know a better idea of how many people we have to deal with, and what we have to do for our actual event, because that is what we are doing. We are making events as much as we are running a circuit.
Yeah, I don't think Worlds is ever easy to get to. It's always a huge commitment of time and effort and practice and work. Like you do have to get good placements at tournaments. Maybe this is a hot take, but I don't know if any old heads would like strongly disagree with me. This and last year are probably some of the easiest years that we've ever had as far as getting a Worlds invite. That doesn't mean it's easy, right? Like this is still a fundamentally difficult task, and I don't know if too easy is something I would ever describe. Like if you hit the bar, it like 500 seemed really big in fall. I don't think anyone was confident that that was going to happen. Like for them, like I wanted to win a regional if I could.
And I
So
know
like
I would love for someone to do this with VG. I saw someone made just a graph for TCG in terms of percentage of people that got CP, a
versus
lower
players.
percentage, versus
Yeah.
like a lower percentage of people who got CP qualified for Worlds than they had in previous years. The face just simply blew up like crazy, which actually something that struck me
Yeah.
when Justin was talking. In fact, they had 40 slots in 2015. I don't have the exact numbers how many people played in 2015, but I would be pretty confident saying it's much more than double. And we have
Yeah,
double the
the
amount of slots.
2015 Nats was a huge tournament, and it was like 500 people. Yeah.
Going from 40 to 75 when the game has, I don't know how much, but I'm sure it's more than double. I would guess it's much
Yeah.
more than that.
Yeah. Comparatively to our
pretty
player base, I like compared to inflation, compared to our player base, we have effectively lost invites relative to 2015, as far as I'm aware. Like we've more than doubled the player base, and we have not doubled invites.
Yeah. So that just like the fact that it was 40
crazy.
in 2015 and now it's only 75. That was fairly striking. Listening to Justin talk.
I would say that like the verbiage matters a lot. It's not that it's easy to qualify. I think that
Yeah.
they just were underprepared for the participation. One, obviously, we're framing this in a bunch of different ways. And I would say that it scales depending on region. It scales depending on how like consistent your local player base is. And this is probably going to lead us into our like first like qualm with the way that they're doing things, or maybe like a success in what they're doing with the new format is locals were just very overpowered this year in terms of like how much you could get, how much of your invite you could get through them, and then some of the scaling of the difficulty at specific locals. And I've been on other like podcasts and videos where I've talked about like we're in different regions. The power scaling in certain regions is growing. So for example, Georgia was not always the most powerful region, but now they're compelled to talk smack on Twitter to New York and New Jersey because they actually do have like they have the arms now to do it, quite literally with some players. Rowan. Again, it's not easy. It's more just like there's a lot more accessibility for tournaments and and a lot more regions, and there's a lot of people that are taking it more seriously, and part of the reason that the locals ended up being so, again, not necessarily overpowered but like kind of overpowered, was because
they really fueled a lot of invites, right?
with the percentage that you could get your invite of it, and like with the way that you could contend with locals, it incentivized more people to go to them. Like I think people very consistently went to their locals because it was so valuable for how much of your invite, what chunk you could get of it. So the new change, obviously, in 2025 is, first off, they're changing the actual structure of some of the events. So we don't have premier challenges and mid-seasons anymore. We have cups and leagues, which are effectively the same thing. They're just different names, and they operate logistically differently. Premier challenges, it was weird. Like I felt like last season, even though they were strong in terms of how much CP you could get from them, 180 total, you didn't like, I don't know, they didn't feel like the same type of events, at least when I went to them. Every premier challenge that I would have had the opportunity to play in, I only played in one. It was all best of one, and in a lot of cases they didn't have, in some cases they didn't have a top cut because they were too small, or like the participation was just not there. In some cases we didn't even do them. Like you'd only get like 10 or 12 people. It would be very often latched onto the end of a mid-season to incentivize more people to come and spend their weekend soaking up some championship points. So locals were just very in a weird spot last year. I think that them redesigning them to have different TPCi redesigning the locals to have a different BFL, like 4-4, is a step in the right direction. Cutting how much value the premier challenges would be and turning them into league challenges. They're not as lucrative in points. They're not as rich in points. So they might not even be worth it for some people, but they might operate the way that they're supposed to, where like there's still a championship point incentive there. You can get a little bit more if you think that it's going to be worth the time and the practice. If it's all you can do in a weekend, you want to test the team idea. I think that it's fine if they function that way and not let's tack a lot of them onto the extra mid seasons. Let's make them best of one. It's essentially you're playing a different format in that way, and it's not the most conducive to growth as a player, growth of a local scene, at least from the way that I would want to do it, right?
So I'm going to push back a little bit, Justin, on that, and it might be a specific issue in the New York City, Long Island area, but I've just a little background for people that don't know, which I don't think I've talked about this before on the channel. I used to work at a game store, and my big thing was building communities for games that were popular in theory, but you couldn't really find games for. And something I've noticed consistently with games is that if your local tournaments do not incentivize high-end players or top-level players to go to them, it will create an issue. Where what I mean by that is, so locals are always the stepping stone for new players, right? But there needs to be an established base of players at those locals for those new players to get to go there, play, probably get their ass kicked 2 or 3 times, but start to meet people that play this game. Now, I know, for example, in New York, quite often, a lot of players, a lot of people bemoaned, a lot of the top players bemoaned having to go to locals. You see it on Twitter all the time. And that isn't a good thing that they felt that they were forced to go, but the fact that they were there meant that somebody could show up to a New York local because, you know, they watch Wolfie VGC, or they watch Moxie Boost, or they watch my channel, or they see Justin's stuff, and they go, wow, that's cool, I want to try this. And they show up and they go, oh my god, there's Toller Webb, hi, I saw you on stream. Or there's Paul Chua, or there's Justin, or whoever, and it makes them feel like what they saw is real and something they can be a part of. And I think by disincentivizing locals, disincentivizing locals as part of your path to Worlds, I should say, that makes it that those moments are going to happen less. My thesis on this whole issue is that the Pokemon Company decided, whether it be for logistical reasons or because they saw one too many people on Twitter who had never played Pokemon before say it's too easy to get an invite, that Worlds needs to be smaller. And while they did accomplish that goal, I think they may have accidentally made competitive Pokemon smaller.
Yeah,
Well-
I completely agree with you. I'm not saying that they handled the change to the locals correctly, but I do think it was a step in the right direction. Big problem, in my opinion, is the separation between what mid-seasons and premier challenges were. I don't like that they get tacked on as like a secondary event to a mid-season. I don't like that they're almost like a different format. And especially experiencing what they could have been in the past, like getting rid of the elevated status for locals was a big deal in my opinion. I don't know why they did it. I don't know exactly what the incentive was, but for those that don't know, when you had a local reach a certain size, so if it was like a 20-person local versus a 50-person local, you would get more points. And in some cases, it was more points for first. It was more points all across the board. I don't know if I'm remembering correctly. I think it was like you'd get 40 points for an elevated premier challenge back in 2015 and 2016, and then like a mid-season when it reached elevated status. I don't even know if they had elevated statuses for mid-seasons, but basically just changed like the payout totals. So that way people weren't just getting participation trophies at these locals. And that's not exactly the function of what it's supposed to be, even to your point. And there was also beforehand, too, like when they first introduced Premier Challenges, they didn't award points at the beginning either. I think 2014 was the first time that they started awarding points. And that is exactly what brought me to my first like ever championship point event was, oh, I can get part of my invite with the Premier Challenges. Granted, it was limited back then, because there was only X amount of invites to go around. But exactly what you just said, like, oh, I might go and run into Cybertron. I think that's exactly what my motivations were back then. And I did, which was super hype because he's awesome. And I went to a Brooklyn PC and I played well. I met Zhang. I met Bake for the first time. I met Lorcy for the first time. A lot of people that I am like very tight with to this day. And it accomplished exactly that. But part of it was like, okay, this is an elevated event. These tournaments are different, and there just wasn't any there really wasn't a separation. And 2014, I don't think they had mid seasons. 2015 was when they introduced them, or 2016.
I think the fundamental issue with locals and why I'm glad they're reducing local BFLs, it's not because I think people shouldn't be able to earn their invites from locals, but I think something Dan can sympathize with, right? Like the distribution of locals is very uneven.
Yes.
To Justin's point too, right? Like some places have a lot of locals, but the locals are all attended by a lot of very strong players that make it like, you know, the equivalent of day 2 in AIC sometimes. And then some people like Dan live in parts of the country, like now we're just talking about NA, parts of the country that like have a lot of people, but don't have locals closer than 2 hours away a lot of the time, most of the time. And so
Mine is
then
not
it's like,
I know
yeah,
people with it much worse than I am, and mine's like there's one within
yeah,
2 hours that is like very new. Prior to that, it's like 2.5 hour drive in.
yep,
I lived right outside of Philly, and we didn't have like tournament organizers that were close. Like the
yep.
closest was Brooklyn, and then I'd have to go all the way down to Delaware and Maryland. So it was like almost always a 2 hour drive. Granted, I live in like a really awkward part of Jersey, and we don't have a bridge over the bay. But like it bothered me for so long that we didn't have like Philly TOs or organizers or like a real Philly scene. Because that was like the closest major city to me, and I was like, why? I mean, we had a regional back then in 2014, but they've elected not to go back there in a while.
I really
So
liked Philly regionals. That always
it
worked
was
for
a
me.
pretty easy to get to tournament, and it was also like, I mean, Northeastern regionals were cool because like as a very high concentration of players in New York, Jersey. Now we are like actually have a Pennsylvania and a Philly scene, Central Pennsylvania, and then you get Ohio players, the DC players, the Maryland players. There's so many players that can like go to Philly. Philly's like in a cool spot, so I'm excited about that. Um, but just to kind of like close out on my point, I do think that like adjusting the BFLs is cool. I think that limiting the amount of points that you can get from locals, even just a little bit, is fine. I would have also been fine with them like cutting the BFLs, but maybe raising the payouts for mid seasons or doing something for like that elevated status where if you are in a region where you're playing 50 to 100 person mid seasons and fighting tooth and nail against Justin Tang, Shiliang Tang, Chepa Cross, Joe Ugarte, 4 points, then you deserve to get rewarded for performing well at those, especially when people win. Like that's a huge accomplishment. One of my proudest moments when I was kind of still developing as a player is winning a midseason that had a lot of these like big name players, multiple regional champions, world's caliber players. Doing well, and a lot of people like you sharpen your claws at locals. So again, I'm never going to be anti-local, but I do think that like if you're a lot of your invite can get be subsidized by your locals or something. Maybe that's the wrong word to use. You should balance that out in a way. And the flip side of that is that they are kind of improving how much majors are paying out. They're putting back the emphasis on majors in, I think, a healthy way with some caveats.
We can
Go
get
ahead,
into
Jake.
that here. So there's been a phrase going around online the last few hours, a little alliteration, and we'll get into that. So as Justin alluded to, the payouts for regionals has increased for points going into this next season, and something that a lot of people complained about was the rat race, for lack of a better word, of the fact that there was no BFL finish. No BFL maximum for internationals. Your finish was, or for people who don't know, what BFL is, essentially they take your top X results from any given category event, that being internationals, regionals, mid-seasons, and PCs, and now it'll be internationals, regionals, and challenges and cups. Is that what they are? And a big complaint a lot of top players had, I know Giovanni Costa was a big advocate for this, was to reduce regional and international BFLs, because it reached a point where if you were going for a travel award, for example, which is an award that if you place in the top X percentage of your region, you would be given basically a subsidy to travel to major events like internationals or worlds, you basically couldn't stop. You had to go to every regional you could, every international you could. And TPCi may have heard Geo, but the monkey's paw curled a little bit, by which I mean internationals and regionals now share a BFL. So that means
It's going to be a very behavior based season. I think it's going to be weird. Like it depends on how many people do what we refer to as wallet warrioring, and how consistent they are, and also the balance of how many good players are going to everything and then icing the less consistent players out of points. Because like in theory, basically, right, there's a 6 BFL now that we share between regional special events and internationals. I think that's close to the right solution. We all say like maybe one international would have been a great BFL, like what it used to be in the good old days. But I think we could have even maybe done with 2, because in theory, I think like right now the path to an invite is like place consistently or deeply, and then like at least at the bottom, like a couple times, like either end of the spectrum or like right in the middle, like top 16, top 16, top 16, go to international, top 32, top 32. That'll get you probably enough points to be right there on that top 70, top 75 in your region, especially outside of North America. Because the people that are going to be going to a lot of events in places like Europe and Australia and Latin America are going to be the people that get travel awards. That's just been the case. Like that's how the structure and the circuit have like behaved pretty much for years. NA gets a lot of the events. We've also seen recently like players from these countries are going to the US and Canada for tournaments. Like Boyd came to, I don't know if it was Toronto. I think Toronto.
Yeah, it's a lot
We got like
cheaper
a bunch of people that went to Toronto and Vancouver from the European nations. Paul Ruiz
had
went
a
to
lot
a
of
bunch.
LA representation. Latin America.
Yeah, we got a lot more players from Mexico as well too. Like I think we had tons of players in day two, more than I've ever seen from Mexico, which is awesome. And because they've had plenty of good players. We've had a lot of good players come out of Mexico, believe it or not, for history. So yeah, basically the point I was trying to make is I think that the BFLs moving in this direction is cool. Like limiting how many regionals, just getting 6 top 128s. I don't know that that's necessarily indicative of this is the highest class of player. Not trying to scold people that do it that way, and by all means do it that way if you can. But I think it's fair. It's a completely fair thing to assess. All right, there's a difference between the complete high end of world's class players and people that just scrape by and get over the bar. And I've been in both scenarios. Not travel award contention because I've never had the time to play full time, but I've been top 16, top 20 in championship points before. So, and I've been literally the bare minimum qualification, like 351 out of 350 for the bar.
So I think something I want to discuss quickly is, yes, for all the reasons you just said, the BFL change is moving in the right direction, but it's being done in a way that, as you alluded to this idea of someone being a wallet warrior, makes things a little less accessible for those people who don't have as much disposable income. So
yes,
international events have a significantly higher point payout than regionals do. So by the two sharing a BFL, I don't have the exact math on the top of my head, but let's say, for example, Justin, you go to 6 regionals and you top 32 all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to 3 regionals and 3 internationals because I got good vacation days, and I top 64 every single event, all the regionals, all the internationals. At that point, it is likely that I would be higher in points. I believe I would be have significantly more points.
Top 60, your top 3 top 64s at internationals would equal his 6 top 32s at regionals.
And to be fair, I actually think that that's okay. I do think that that's okay. If you go to 3 internationals and you get top 64 at all of them, I actually think that that's an achievement. It's hard to get top 64 at these
I think
events.
the problem is less
just to be clear for the audience.
The problem is is that he was able to go to 3.
Yes.
Yeah. So just for the audience's reference, right? Like top 64 at an international is 250 points in this new system. Top 8 at a regional is 280 points, and everything else is less than that. And we just had a season where most of the internets were the same size as the largest regionals, and you didn't get more points for getting top 8 at the 1,000 person regional. Or 900 or 800 person regional. I can confirm, did get top 8, did not get extra points from Charlotte. More people does not necessarily mean higher quality players. Abso-freaking-lutely, right? There's a big difference in the top end of players at an internet versus at a regional. But fundamentally, when you played at an international championship, for most people, myself excluded in this case, because I ran into really strong players in the first 4 rounds of NAIC. For most people, you play mostly local players until like 7, 8, 9. In day 1, or I guess it will now be 7, 8 in day 1 with the new structure.
That's usually the case at each international too. Like in NAIC, playing American players. When I went to EUIC, I played mostly European players. When I went to LAIC, I played mostly Brazilian people because I was in Brazil.
Yep. We'll see. So it's like, yes, it is harder to get past the roughly top 128, top 64 barrier in a lot of these international championships, but like it is not dramatically harder to get there. And then you get payouts equivalent to the person that got top 8 at a regional for attending. And then, so then you can say like, okay, well, I will benefit much more from attending ICs than I will from attending regionals.
Yes.
So I will simply, with my infinite disposable income, go to ICs and then get 250 points 3 times. Now I'm at 750 points. Or, maybe 250 points twice and then no points the other time because I get no points at ICs. That's my strategy.
There's a bit of a sociological difference, though, I will say, because the level of preparedness that people go to internationals with now, one, because of the prize payout being drastically more, and two, because it's like full of internet. Like you cannot go to it, you can't make it to a day 2 and win a single set if you just skated by in day 1. That's just like almost not how it works anymore in day 2s, especially internationals. The people that we've seen perform like well routinely at internationals, like it's funny because they keep doing it. Like, the Marco Silvas, Paul Ruiz has multiple, Eduardo Cunha. People like are continually doing well. Jody Azarelli is a good one too. Like they got top 8 at NAIC last year. They got top 16 at NAIC this year. There's Ragov has a crazy international resume, and it's a different game, I think, and it's like the closest thing that we get to in terms of simulating worlds. So I don't want to take away from how difficult the internationals can be, like to make deeper runs. So the points being like drastically higher, sure, yes, maybe it tapers off towards like the top 64 and the top 128 range. But I would say, yeah, it's like, getting top 16 at a regional is about as difficult in some cases as getting, top 32 or top 64 at the bigger ones at internationals. One's
Hey man, I've
level
never
of
done it, so
preparedness.
And
I don't know.
I will say from my 3 data points for the 3 internationals I have attended, you are or 3 NAICs I've attended, you are mathematically more likely to play a world champion than not, just from the round 1 from my data.
Oh yeah, because you played your fair share. Well, this is the thing, right? The problem is not with people saying, "Okay, I'll replace my regionals with ICs." That's kind of the narrative we've suggested so far. The problem that people have is with, "Oh, I will play 7 regionals and I will play 3 ICs, and because of that, I am fundamentally guaranteed if I get points at all of these tournaments, just because of how big." Not fundamentally, but I'm like almost guaranteed if I get points at all these tournaments because of how big the IC payouts are, right? You will just always beat the person who has the same set of results at regionals. And that's fine because ICs are harder. That's fine. But not everyone can go to ICs.
Yes, that's the real issue.
So you can't try. Like my flight to Sao Paulo, I was looking today because I was like, oh, maybe I should go to LAIC. My flight to Sao Paulo is $1,500.
It's not your flight. You ain't getting that flight.
I'm a grad student. It's not happening. So I guess if I go to ICs, I'm going to 2. And that's different for different people and people in different circumstances and people that get travel awards and all that sort of stuff, right? But like, this is the bad part. It's like, it's better to have a combined BFL than 2 distinct BFLs because then you need to attend 2 ICs to be competitive. If there was like a 6 regional, 2 IC BFL combo, right, then you would need to attend the 2 ICs to be competitive.
And I will say,
everyone's saying that they should do the 1 BFL for ICs, but they're never, ever, ever, ever going to do that because they want as many people going to ICs as humanly possible. And
yeah,
that's
where they pay for the venue space.
Yeah, it's
they
just
don't for
like
Worlds.
That possibility is not on the table. That's just the way internationals are so overpowered. And in fact, they're never going to I don't think anyway, they're ever going to limit the BFLs. Makes it just inherently really difficult to work with.
I know. That's why I said, I was like, look, can we compromise for 2? Because there is no counterbalance to the fact that you can just replace like your travels with ICs instead of regionals. And as you said, those people that are in those positions are statistically, by every metric, going to have a better shot at finishing in the top 75, especially with limited invites. There's no counterbalance now with nerfing locals, which I was okay with them restructuring the local stuff, but they didn't they didn't take the right approach on both ends. So they kind of tipped the scales too far in one favor. And that's why I said there's like a behavioral metric to this, because if the top 50 players in the world are consistently going to every international, right, it's going to be ridiculously hard to get through those top 64 echelons and the top 32 like to break into those point thresholds. So it's weird to me too that they did some type of tapering off of the points for regionals from like top 8 to top 16, but they didn't do that necessarily with internationals in a way, which I think would have also been like one thing that they could have done.
Oh no,
Maybe
no, they
balance
did.
it
No,
out.
they did. It's just
Top
so
8 to top
high.
16 is huge. It's
Yeah,
just that the numbers are big.
The numbers are so ridiculous that you can't really notice it.
The biggest jump in both cases is top 16 to top 8.
Yeah, for
in international,
internets,
400 to 600, and then at regionals it's 160 to 280. So it's a
yeah,
200
so
point
it's a
difference.
pretty similar tapering effect. It's just the numbers are so comically big at internationals, you don't even notice it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, well, I mean, I for some people, right, that 600 points versus 400 points for winning the extra round in top cut could be a huge deal. That's because we're having asymmetrical cut, right? So like everyone is going to start in the same 20 something person cut, and then you better hope you win 2 rounds or 1 round, depending on whether you have a bye. And if you don't, then you don't get the extra 200 points. I think like one thing that's important is to have an idea of like what would have been ideal in this case. For me, it's something like there's a 5 regional BFL and a 1 internet BFL, but one of your internets shares a BFL with the regionals or something. So it's like, okay, you can fill out that last slot with a regional if you can't go to an internet, but if you go to 2 internets, then you can cover a regional or something. But it's like 2 distinct BFLs with a large ICBFL is the worst case, and then
there's no counterbalance to it. How do you as a player justify going to our regionals now my testing grounds to grow as a player, and then like if I get good enough, do I go to to more ICs, like because you're basically betting on yourself at a lot of these tournaments to be able to like pay it off, or you just have a lot of dispensable income to be able to say, I'm going to go do this as my super expensive hobby over and over and over. And that's fine. I don't think that that's like the worst case. There are much more expensive hobbies that you could have. I don't have a yachting membership. I would love to, but
and you don't own a legacy Magic deck.
That would really ruin my bank account more so than a yachting membership.
I never should have sold my legacy deck.
I'd rather extend the question to like from that framing, Jacob and Dan, like you guys are newer to the structure and the circuit, and these changes it's surprising that they're so drastic and so drastically backwards in some way. What do you feel like you guys have to do now as players? Like how are you adjusting to say, I am going to try and compete at the highest level and win these tournaments? Are you going to more locals because now they're worth less? Are you going to more regionals because now they're technically scaling worse compared to internationals? Are you participating in more global challenges? Or do you genuinely feel a large chunk of your incentive to play for a Worlds invite is like just gone?
I enjoy the hobby. I enjoy seeing all the people I see at events, so I'm going to keep going to events. But frankly, I'm going in with, I'm probably not going to make Worlds, and I know that, and that's just how it is. And it like that, you could argue that it feels different with the top 75 because it's not that like I don't want to, it was more attainable before, but even then, like it was almost like, let's say let's say they raised the bar to 600, whatever, a number. Okay, so I have to play at like probably like 120% of what I feel like I am. But now it almost feels like, okay, I have to do like 200% of what I am. And that's like, okay, well, possible. Anything's possible, but I'm going into like, World is not really on my brain at this point.
What about you,
like,
Jacob?
Well, I mean, I have a whole script written to be coming soon about my crippling imposter syndrome. But for me, this season was a letdown. I mean, I ended last season.
I love pasta.
Me too. I had it for dinner. Getting my
Me too.
Getting my best result ever when I top 64 at NAIC last year, and I said to myself, okay, and maybe this was wrong of me to do, but I said, okay, that's gonna be my new minimum. I'm gonna day 2 everything. I'm gonna go. Let's go. And then I did not day 2 a single event this year. And I feel like, frankly, a big part of what happened was I kept getting lazy. I knew that I could, on an average day, 6-3 regional. And that is reflected by the fact that for all but one regional, I did, in fact, 6-3. So I know that, well, I have this flaw. I was able to qualify this year despite that flaw, perhaps because the structure was easier, and I just kind of let it slide and didn't grow as much as I could have as a player. So I know that if I want to qualify this year, I can't get lazy. I think a perfect example is, and we all worked on the Iron Crown team that we all played at Charlotte. I kind of tapered off, got bored, got distracted, whatever, for the last week of testing and ended up playing an old version of it because I just didn't keep up with everything. And I ended up 6-3ing. I think it's pretty fair to say that if I had actually paid attention and kept up, I probably would have been able to squeeze one more win out of that event. I think this structure is going to make me focus. It's going to make me lock in, as the internet likes to say.
In.
Maybe, yeah.
Lock in. And
these top X formats are stressful.
They are, and you bring up a really interesting point, and I love everybody's perspective on this. But I was reflecting on what like different structures and circuits have done to like my mentality of what type of player I'm trying to be every season, because I know the mentality of some of the greatest players in the world. One of them is literally in this call right now, Toller Webb.
I struggle more with mentality than any other player with my pedigree.
I'm just
I
gassing him,
feel like.
but I know the perspective of like I want to be the best at every tournament I go to. I'm always trying to aim to be the best possible player I can be, so I'm in a position to win the world championships. I know those people, they're playing almost a different game than I want to qualify for worlds. That is a different game because you don't need the same skill sets to win tournaments that you do to day 2 events, or to just qualify and get championship points, to go 6-3, to go 7-2, and then lose all of your rounds in Charlotte like I did. I like to use the expression that like when you aim to win, you will accidentally get championship points. Like you will still get points. Like if you work hard enough if you try to be like that best player at the tournament every single time you go to the tournament, you'll get there. And if you work on what works best for you to do that, that's how you will improve naturally. And I feel like that is at least the solution I have found for myself. And I'm constantly working on that process. But that's not how everybody plays. And to disincentivize the lazy mentality or the just laissez-faire approach to Pokemon, I don't know if that's necessarily correct, but I do think that some part of the structure needs to fight against that, because we want to put the best people in the best position to succeed. We want crazy high caliber matches. We want cool team ideas. We want crazy meta games and awesome stories. That's what will grow the game. That's what will make it entertaining. That's what will get more people to participate. That is one of the other biggest factors in terms of growing the game. And what they're doing to the local stuff, and then how far they're pushing the disparity between internationals and then the local scene. I'm worried that we're going to lose some of that. Like, I don't want people to be so incentivized from just grinding, getting better. We're going to lose stories like Patrick Connors, who won NAIC, who was like, I need to fight like hell against the best players in the world to prove that I'm good enough. And
well, I mean, even just to get his invite, right? Like he needed top 16 NAIC too. Like he put himself in, I mean, I know you talked with Patrick a lot more than I've talked with Patrick about this, right? But it was still true that even if the only thing he wanted was his invite, he was in a position where he had to get top 16 NAIC to have it happen. So like the prep he does changes compares to someone who can plan out their whole season. And like, I don't know, like as Jacob was saying, like you can end up getting lazy because you're like, I just want my invite so I can 6-3 6 times and attend enough locals and I will be good.
Yeah, and I don't know that Patrick, like at least when I talked to him, wish he was here to go over this because he'd have a great perspective on that.
Yeah.
At least from when I talked to him, it didn't sound like what he was doing was I need to get top 16. I'm playing and building to get top 16. Right. I think that like he said I need to be as serious about this as I can, and he was really happy about the growth process and like just because he was focused on becoming a better player. Mm-hmm. And then he reaped the benefits of his hard work by performing and executing. And I think that a lot of people will struggle to have that mentality. It is a very, very resilient thing to be able to say, I'm just here for sport. Like, I just want to be the best I can be and have fun and go and game, like, and still be very competitive and be fierce and like, be matched against world-class players and world champions and national champions and say like, I'm just as good. I can win this, right? Or I believe in myself. I can win this. And I would hope that like, the perspective that we're getting from this new circuit is like, okay, it's going to be a lot more intense. Maybe we don't like it right now, but I still like this game. I still was approaching it like I want to be as good as I possibly can be. Maybe I have to change the travel schedule and where I go to events and where I'm investing into myself and where I'm betting on myself. But I hope it raises the bar for everybody. Like I'm raising the bar for myself. I need to be able to perform better. And that's kind of the point that I was trying to make when I was saying like, how do I think about this structure in terms of getting points? Because when I was, the bar was what, 300 in 2023? 300, 400? I forget.
I think it was 300 because we had the half season.
Yeah, it was 300.
Yeah, we didn't have like locals or anything. We had like premier challenges.
Yeah, we had a couple PCs at the end.
Knew in the beginning of the season after San Diego, I bombed San Diego and I was like, man, that sucked. I don't know if I can do what I just did at several regionals. And like, is that going to be okay? There's no locals. I'm only going to be able to go to NAIC, maybe EUIC. I didn't know if that was in the cards yet. And I didn't even plan on going to EUIC earlier on in the season until I had won Charlotte. So I thought about it and was like, I need to change my play style. I need to change how I approach tournaments to be way more consistent, because I can't go and do the 6-3 or 6-4, 7-3 back in 10-round Swiss, because that would not be gratifying to me. That would not be the game that I love. I want to play good Pokemon, go compete for tournament wins, and I had to change a lot about that, and I had to see measurable success at each tournament I went to before like committing to anything else in the season. And I even had tournaments that I canceled that year because I was like, all right, I want to do all of these, but it's a lot to grind out that many tournaments, and that's another element that I'm a little bit worried about too. The BFLs are lower,
yeah,
but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to less tournaments.
Yes.
Yeah, you still got to optimize your BFLs, right? That's pretty painful.
And there's something, I think there's something about the difference between a bar and the top 75, just for like, as Toller said,
Speaking
for
of
like,
raising the bar,
yes, for like, just for how you think about it, because it is, as you say, Justin, it's about making yourself the best player you can be. It's a lot easier to think about that when there's a bar rather than I have to beat everyone. But not.
I have to beat the specific person, so they
yes,
don't
I beat the
pass me.
specific person, so I'm not. So I'm in that top 75 thing. It's also, this is something I think everyone's pointed out, but this season can be a lot more toxic. I love the community, and I think we are not a very toxic community. Not that there's always some issues, some thorns in people's sides, but like I think I love the community. That's why I enjoy going to events as much as anything. And I think we're pretty well positioned to not be, hopefully, not as toxic as some other horror stories here at other communities, but it's going to be more toxic. It just it has to be. The system means that there are going to be more instances of people being like,
right,
maybe not the best.
Yeah,
I trust people to not take it too far. I believe
been
in everyone.
Gross before. Yeah, it has been gross.
Yeah, but it just, the system incentivizes it being more gross, and that sucks.
So story briefly. This is actually about the day 2 race rather than about top X invites, just in general. But 2023, Colin Hire goes into day 2 of NAIC, 8th in CP, and top 8 gets travel award to Japan. And the only situation where Colin Hire can miss his day 2 invite and his, and his money and all that sort of stuff. The only situation where he can miss it is if his best friend, Raghav, happens to get finals or better at the tournament. And Colin has like a certain level of bad performance in day 2.
What happened?
And of course, right, Colin didn't get a good enough performance in day 2. He got to day 2 and played well. That's great. Raghav makes top 8. And the worst thing in the world is sitting next to Colin and watching like the emotions spin in his head between I want my friend to succeed and I need my friend to fail as Raghav is playing in top 8 and top 4. Like, I don't mean to like monetize my friend's suffering, but that was really hard to watch as his friend. And it was probably one of the hardest days that he's gone through related to this game. And guess what? We get to watch that, and this is the kind of like missing in the top X system. It's like missing the bar is like, okay, I missed the bar. I knew how much I needed to get, and I didn't get there. Missing in the top X system, when like you were 73rd, and then an AIC comes around and you're 78th at the end. That's the kind of stuff that makes people quit. Like, It does not feel good. It
also, missing the bar,
frustrating.
Missing the bar is much more like, okay, that's on me. I could have done better at XYZ. When you get knocked out by someone else, that's gonna be really ugly.
Yeah, it's like, well, I wish they had succeeded so much. Why do I ever want a format where I want to wish for my friends to fail? Like, that's horrible.
Just when pushing yourself, it's a lot easier when everything is up, like everything is in your control, and when there's a not.
Or at least it seems that
the amount of your amount of source income and PTO, et cetera, is not necessarily. But like, at least in terms of your Pokemon results, like that is in your control.
That's going to be bad.
It's a lot easier to self-evaluate when there's a bar. When it's top 75, like whether this should be the case or not, it probably shouldn't. Like, but people are going to, just as humans, they're going to fall into the like, oh, I was good enough, but I got screwed by XYZ, which is a lot easier to do when you're in the like, there's a top 75 rather than a bar. It's imposed. It's all up to you.
And it's weird because it's like, why didn't they just implement an artificial bar with an artificial limited amount of invites?
Well, so
it's with like
I think
1,000 or 1,100 CP.
Yeah,
I
think I know the reason is I think the reason is just uncertainty. And the fact that like they want to plan events, they want certainty. 75 gives them a lot more certainty than a really high bar because, stuff can happen. They want that certainty. And I understand that. It's reasonable. That doesn't mean I have to like it. I don't like it at all. I think it sucks for us, but it's probably better for them. Probably better for TPCi. So I get it, but it still sucks.
Let me push back with this a little bit here. So something that I've seen floating around a lot is people going, oh, they want you to go to the internationals because they want more money. Give me your money. Give me your delicious entry fees. But the fact of the matter is, this is, again, something from working in the game industry for a little while, especially for games that aren't really esports. Pokemon is a competitive video game. It's not an esport. Look at League of Legends, look at Valorant. They aren't really comparable. These kind of conventions for trading card games, for games like VGC, they do not generate money. They are costs because they are advertising, right? So the question becomes, how much money is going to be generated by doing it this way versus the old way? Now you could say, well, people still know it's Worlds. Timmy sitting at home who stumbles across the YouTube live stream and sees Wolf Glick versus Paul Ruiz and goes, oh, those are the YouTube guys, and watches them have a battle that's good and intense and fun to watch. It doesn't matter if there's 1,000 people at that tournament or 20 people at that tournament. What they're getting on stream is the same, and the stream may be the thing that actually is advertising and the content that gets produced after the fact. But one could also say something that I think a really strong part about Pokemon, especially when I was trying to convince two of my best friends, Scott and Sierra, to get into the game very recently. I'm pretty sure Scott's watching right now. Hi, Scott. Is that
hey,
I could say to them,
Hi, Scott.
Internationals and Worlds, they are Pokemon conventions with tournaments at them. Come, have fun, see all the cool things, because I know you like Pokemon, and if you like the tournament, you get into it. And Worlds was, that house on a hill at the very end of it, especially looking what they did with, Japan. I know the tournaments were run very poorly. That's no one's saying anything different about that, but they had, the drone shows and the orchestras and these kinds of things because they knew there was going to be a large amount of
still an
attendance.
Experience.
Exactly. And
celebration of the game.
Exactly. And if we are going to artificially shrink the event, unless the plan is to shrink the number of attendees that are competing, but offer up more space for spectators, which frankly seems to not be the case to me if they're going to start booking worlds in places like Hawaii, where just by sheer geography, you can only fit so many people. It begs the question of what the actual intent of the circuit is at this point. Is the point to have Pokemon conventions, or is the point to have a cool live stream?
What are they really getting?
No.
What is VGC? Let's get into the
probably losing money on this.
But also, even just my point is less like it's literally just easier. I honestly think that is like logistically, it's just easier for them to plan stuff out a year with the cert.
Be easier if everything was online.
Yeah, and it's also not like we're saying, oh, they do it. They've done it so perfectly in the past. What are they thinking changing things? I do think a lot of it in some ways is experimenting to find equilibrium, satisfying the largest number of people on the operational side and participation side. And, I always try to be very optimistic about where the structure is going. You mentioned, Pokemon is not an esport, but what's crazy is like it's a baby esport. It is close, and it has a lot of the pillars of what could be a functioning esport. And I feel like we're constantly getting things, then we're having things taken away. Some notable, painful examples: spectator mode is a big one. The amount of stream matches that we get, and TVs and side streams, and day 2 Swiss is a step in the right direction, but now we're changing the Swiss again for a topic that we should get into.
Yes.
Maybe let's talk about some of the positives. Let's be optimistic for a bit, because it's not just going to be 100 people spending all the money getting the invites.
Yeah, what's the summary here, right? Like, there are definitely some uncomfortable things about playing Top X. Top X is just like, speaking of things that poorly contribute to mentality for a lot of people. There are uncomfortable things about ICs being able to supplant a lot of regional performances. It feels like getting points from 3 ICs feels a little bit like cheating. And pretty cool with local BFLs. We're cool with EP payouts being increased. It feels like high performances are being rewarded more. That's good, I guess. So then I guess we should talk about more good things.
Let's start with something we've alluded to several times at this point, but haven't actually gotten into. Every 6-3 player, every 12-3 player at every regional has the common enemy of the bubble. And we are changing the tournament structure, it appears, to attempt to, if not eliminate, at least mitigate how often people will have the same record as somebody who makes top cut but doesn't actually get into it. So, Justin, why don't you take that one first?
So obviously the structure, in case you didn't know, we primarily had 2-day Swiss tournaments. First day, you get 9 rounds. All X2s make it. Next day, the best 8 records, depending on the size of the day 2 that you get and the size of the tournament, is 5 or 6 rounds of Swiss, and those best records end up making the top 8. We had really bad scenarios this year where, because the tournaments were really large and in these weird kind of purgatory zones, and we don't have draws in VG, we borrow our structure a lot from the TCG circuit, which you can have a draw in TCG. You can have intentional draws in TCG so that you can have more favorable positions going into your tiebreakers. And the tiebreakers work much more effectively for TCG than they do for the video game because we can't draw.
There are fewer people at every record in TCG relative to because there are just more records available.
They have a lot more record structure. They have a lot more record options, and they're also bigger tournaments. So they're like the deeper sizes, like 2,000 to 2,500 people playing in a TCG tournament is much better for like a 7 round day 2. I think it's 6 is still the maximum. I'm not sure. VG, we would end up in situations, especially in the 6 round Swiss regionals, where X3 all the way down to top 16, but some X3s were in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And famously, I think that happened pretty badly in Orlando, right? I think in Orlando this year and in Charlotte, we had a ton of X3s that whiffed in top 8. They'd have the same record, but you're getting a different amount of points, different money, and different potential for more points and money because you're not getting a shot at playing in the top 8. And that's just, it feels extremely unfair. It sucks to be in that position. It sucks even at the lower positions in the tournament where you're 33rd or you're 65th. But it really exceptionally sucks when you're at that like payout and you could be reimbursing your trip. So the new change is that we're doing away with that. We have asymmetrical cut, which is a huge deal. It's how they do it for the World Championships right now.
Actually, the World Championship structure was new for everyone. The Swiss +1 kind of structure where everybody plays the same Swiss rounds, and then we get an asymmetrical cut after. And now we find out that it's not actually just new for Worlds, it's being used for everything, right? So this is, yeah.
Overall, it's less that we have to play too, I believe. Like, it's less rounds overall.
Yeah, 10 or 11 rounds as opposed to...
Yes.
Yeah.
So what that's going to do is at the upper echelons, if you're going to kind of get rewarded for getting buys in the X+1. So like if you make it immediately to top 16, because you're 9-1. I think that's probably what it's going to be, or like you're 8-1 or 9-1.
It'd be 10-1 or 9-2, yeah. In most of the cases with the regional sizes that we've been having, although maybe fewer people attend. I don't know.
Yeah, and you're going to end up getting like immediately just boom, you locked your top 16, which is kind of how it is anyway right now with less rounds. Like it's less steps. I saw a case made by Rajan on Twitter that we could have like Swiss +2, and then it would literally alleviate all the problems. Like that would have been like almost the perfect way to do it. But I'm still thankful for the fact that they're doing the asymmetrical cut and then the Swiss +1. Less rounds means that you literally have to win less sets of Pokemon, cover less matchups statistically, and you get rewarded again for immediately popping off out of the gate. But when you get to those top 16 matches and you're fighting against the person that barely squeaked in and then won their Swiss +1 round, not necessarily like they don't deserve to be there or anything, but you're playing against somebody that like you might just have a much more awkward record than them. I don't know if it'll end up being like you can be 8-2 or 8-3 at that point, and then you're playing against like an undefeated, and then knocking them out. But that's still not as drastic as something like where Riley and Andrew Ding played at Sacramento this year, and like Andrew was 14-0 and then lost his top 8 to Riley, who I think just squeaked in to cut on resistance. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? Like that, I think we can live with that. And then having to be in that final top cut bracket, it does feel much more like competitive. You know, your opponent's teams, like you're doing your flow charting, your game planning. You know what your bracket path is going to look like. So there's not as little stability with like Swiss rounds and all of that. And again, we're getting rid of the worst element of all of it, which was tiebreakers and resistance, which again, it could be the most heartbreaking piece of it.
It also just from a spectator perspective makes everything more exciting. There was several times these last 2 seasons where there was the last round of Swiss on day 2, and they would show everybody a match on stream that was purported to be a win and in, and they hyped it up like, oh, if X person wins, they will be in top 8. And then the tiebreakers come out, and it turns out neither of these players had any shot of making top 8, which feels even worse.
Classic.
Feels even worse when you're showing the whole stream how wonderful. Did this happen to one of you too? Is that why we're making these faces? Am I bringing up?
No,
trauma?
it's just I
No.
have watched a lot of tournaments this year because I'm a grad student. I can't go to that many tournaments, so it's like I've watched a lot of tournaments and I've watched this happen like 6 times. It's so annoying as a spectator. It's like I want to root for the person that just won.
Polar
That's
being
so
one of the
big.
rare
It's like
cases
they got
where he
17.
won his winning in and still made top 8 though.
Oh yeah, I always make top 8.
And the other issue, of course, or the other upside, as opposed to just eliminating these issues, is it's also just more exciting, right? If we want VGC to grow up from being a baby esport to a real esport, we need more player narratives.
I don't necessarily want VGC to be a real esport, but that's
I
whole
want fat stacks for being nice at this game. I want fat stacks.
Well, I want more views, Tollers.
Yeah,
I want more people to
like
air
you
it.
can think about the pro of it, but the con is pretty significant too. Is like it gets a lot more exclusive, a lot more quickly. The people that are allowed to do it gets much smaller. Like
I need
That's
more
brother.
money for telling people why Pikachu's secretly bad. But there's this more exciting games happening, right? If there are just more total games being played where these people's tournament lives are at stake, not theoretically because 4 rounds from now it's going to turn out they lost one too many games, but right now at this moment, if they lose, they're out, and we're just going to have more of that, which is more exciting to watch.
You know what else I like about this actually is that people will spend less tournament time knowing that they are eliminated and still feeling like they have to play.
That's also true.
The worst part that I experienced a lot in 2023. I haven't made day 2 without succeeding this season. The trick is that I didn't really make day 2 all that much. One thing I experienced a lot in 2023 was getting to day 2 at either 7-2 or 8-1, and then losing a requisite number of rounds to have no shot at making top 8 anymore on tiebreakers, feeling completely depressed and still needing to play 3 rounds. And it's awful when that happens. So the nice thing about the shorter day 2 is like, okay, you've made day 2. That's a huge accomplishment. You know you're going to get a certain minimum placing. And now, if you lose round 1 and you can't make cut anymore, you play maximum 2 more rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I think every single day 1 where I made a 7-2 advancement, I did not make top cut. But then every single time that I went 8-1, I did. So like, obviously it was a huge advantage to start off the day better. And I think that literally goes away, or at least it's at least way less difficult in terms of starting the day 7-2. And like, you can really just take it much more one game at a time. So I'm very happy about that change. I hope that they, if anything, improve on that, but happy the way it is that they made that change for this upcoming season. Other positives, that's it. That's the only change that we're happy about.
No, we got two more. Both of which are speculative, right? There were 2 little paragraphs in the new doc that you look at and you say, well, I don't know what that means because you're not telling us, but it sounds promising. First one,
the incentive?
Well, the first one, less exciting one, is the incentive, right? They have said that there are going to be some kind of incentives for getting championship points besides Worlds, which is a good thing because it means maybe there's a reason to strive to get, 200 points, because even if it means there's no way I'm getting to Worlds, I'll get something. Of course.
A Raging Bolt giveaway.
A Raging Bolt. See, that's the
Oh my god.
What is
Give
it?
me a Raging Bolt, please.
That would be worth more than money. Like, if they were like $20 for everybody that got 200 CP, I would rather have a Raging Bolt.
Well, Raging Bolt's $30 plus a bunch of time, assuming you already had the DLC.
Could be 90 if you don't have the other
my
game,
shiny
right?
Raging Bolt.
Shiny
Raging Bolt TCG card with a little stamp on it.
Yeah, that's the question. My mind immediately goes to, again, back in the day in Magic the Gathering, when they would mail out these player reward promo cards, which were these cool, completely textless cards that were, at the time, very unique. They've made a lot more of them since then, but I'm not going to get into all that. So the question is, if the prizes are cool, this is great, but until we know what the prizes are...
You don't know. Yeah, you don't know. And it's one of those things, it's like, how are they going to incentivize people to play that don't think they have a realistic shot at making Worlds? Right? Because we benefit a lot. I think it's a good thing the game is bigger. I know that's a huge hot take among people that play, but among people organizing, that's not that hot. Like, or sorry, that is a hot take, like a genuinely hot take. 'Cause it's like, how do you accommodate all of these players? It's like, okay, this structure means less people are playing with the expectation that they will be able to fight for Worlds. Fine. We've had that before. We've had a lot smaller tournaments before as well. Because it felt like, here's the old people's club of people that can expect to make Worlds, and then here's me starting. not me specifically, but someone new. It's like, how do you give someone a sufficient carrot to get them to learn the game well enough without feeling like they're failing because they can't or don't think they can make a Worlds invite?
Do you have any theories on what would be like an actual incentive other than like
I think-
outright like paying cash?
I think it's gonna be promo
Booster
cards.
packs.
Unique promo cards are very cheap to do compared to a lot of the other options.
Yeah.
And would hold more value than a lot of the other things, right? So it's like it's cheaper than mailing everyone boxes. It's cheaper than giving people cash in a lot of cases relative to the amount of value that they get because of the exclusivity.
You can sell them too. Is a big deal. Like
exactly.
something that's
Yeah,
been
that's
actually a pretty big
Right.
change over the past couple of years of Worlds is like the Worlds kits are going for more money. Like I was able to subsidize a certain amount of my trip to Japan last year by selling my kit, like just the promo card.
Yeah.
Itself
Just to
for
be
a good
clear,
amount
right?
of
Like
money.
I sold my promo cards at Worlds for $900
Mhm.
the day that we got them, basically.
Cash
And
money.
that was most of my flight.
Goldango. Make it rain.
That's one of my favorites, personally.
Well, but here's the tension there, right? If this is a relatively low bar, the idea here is to incentivize people who aren't going to try for Worlds
Right, for
anyway,
invite,
right?
are still gonna try.
So
Yeah.
some of these rewards need to be relatively easy to obtain. So my
It can't be that exclusive, yeah.
So my big concern is, let's say they do cards, because cards are cheap, they're easy, and frankly, if they have to choose between optimizing the circuit for VG attendance or TCG attendance, it just makes more sense to do TCG because it's a higher profit margin item, so on and so forth. So if they are promo cards, odds are there will be a lot in circulation. So maybe in a few years, when people lose their copies,
Well, what qualifies as a lot, right? Because like there are some thousands of Raging Bolt Secret Illustration rares that exist, right? Like how many promo cards do you think they give out? Do you think they give play sets of 4 to everyone who meets a certain bar? That's going to be
even cheaper option. That's
1,000 play sets, like 200 play sets. Like that ends up feeling pretty exclusive. And if Worlds promo cards could go for like restricted to being, I get 1 for getting to Worlds. There were 3,000 people who got promo cards last year or something. Not 3,000, but like over 1,000 people who got promo cards last year. They were still very valuable because of the exclusivity.
I think a cool option that maybe is worth exploring is like limited marked shinies. That would like a shiny Entei with like a Cloud Watcher mark, or like something like that's even just exclusive marks, something digital.
Loser mark.
So like if you take a video of yourself like receiving the Pokemon or whatever, at the event or anything, like that's something that you could literally trade off even if it's a digital, because that's something like you would need to have a legitimate copy of to give away.
Mhm.
And it's also probably something that doesn't cost a lot of money. I think that they just click a couple buttons in the dev kit and then boom, you have a shiny Entei. But I do think that things with like physical value are cool. I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that they get even more creative in something that it doesn't necessarily have to be money. I don't always think that that's just the end all be all. Money is nice, but cool stuff. Like, I mean, if they were going to give me shiny Iron Crown because I got 300 championship points, I'm going to those locals, bro, to get those points by a certain point in the season. You know what I mean? So that would be a cool way to like incentivize some things. I would love for them to get creative. I want to see them, try, fight against the whatever pressure that they're putting on people to not fight for the top 75 invite. So however they do that, there's a couple ideas. Any other ideas?
Also, just for context, if I know you said 200 as like a bar, there were 2,100 people who got 200 points this year. You obviously can't 1-to-1 that because the point structure is different, but like that's fairly exclusive.
Yeah.
In VG only, or in VG?
VG, it is just VG. TCG,
okay, that's a very different number. Yeah.
That is
So
true. That is true.
my concerns are twofold. Number one, I think they need to be things that people want for the sake of wanting them. If they want them for the sake of scarcity, if they're not just like cool things to have, that creates a whole other secondary market issue where people, if it feels like the Pokemon company is saying, here's your card, we're giving it to you because it'll be worth a lot of money, wink nudge, that's not a great look either, especially if the idea is to...
We're giving it to us because it's a cool card, and it
What
just
we
so
choose
happens
to do with it.
Well, that's what we
Do they
say,
do
but
they have a reason to fight against that?
Not really. I mean, they can always pretend the secondary market doesn't exist.
Of course they can, but it's a matter of making sure that this is something that, Jimmy, who, played Pokemon cards with his younger brother, and found out that people play tournaments, went, oh, that's cool, I want that, and he has no concept of the secondary market. It needs to not be worth cool. It needs to not be something that's desirable because of the secondary market. My other concern is that my fingers crossed, is that VG and TCG have different incentives. My suspicion is it's not, where it's getting promo cards. But let's say, for example, if we're getting 200 points in VG, you gotta say an exclusive marked Entei. Let's call it the Contender, because you're vying for points or whatever, and you get a shiny Entei with an exclusive mark. That's pretty sick. I would, even if I had no interest left in Pokemon, I might be like, maybe I'll try to get that. It's really cool. We want to make sure that
is that worth $500 to $600 worth of travel funds though?
No, I'm just gonna win.
It's actually called
more.
It's Entei the broke boy.
Entei the scammed. Yeah, Entei the fleeced.
But I
They did good.
I hear what Jacob's saying. It would be great for us to actually have video game stuff and not card stuff.
Yeah,
It'd be nice to always get a video game thing and
Oh,
then have something
exclusive
that,
Pokemon,
like,
not
physical.
mystery gifts, not points in the game. Please give us Pokemon.
no, you're
that we
gonna.
can use.
Please don't give me battle points.
We're gonna get
Or
so
at
many
least
battle
outfits.
points.
Oh, no!
My god!
I would do
Well-
outfits or like custom ball throw animations, but I would say that initially, but now that doesn't even matter because if you're
Yeah,
playing on
yeah.
stream or whatever,
Yeah, you can't even see your.
Yeah, you can't. It's like,
yeah. So please, that's off the table.
Point, yeah.
So,
If you get
Well,
300 points, you get spectator mode. That would be worth it.
oh, I'm
The versus
locking in.
recorder.
You personally become able to do spectator mode for
Yes.
your locals.
yes.
Good
Yeah.
luck.
Never-
I hope
you never
it's
get to
not
play
a rich
again.
get richer situation too. Like I was joking around about the versus recorder, but then I thought about it. I was like, wow, that would really be worth it for like YouTubers and people that are like trying to record their games and stuff. That might also like give them a physical advantage in the actual tournament if you can versus record and then watch your games back. Not necessarily, of course, but you know, people argue all types of competitive advantages in this game. So
Mhm.
we already know next year, you know, one of the biggest advantages you can have is a juicy wallet. But hopefully, again, like they do something to add on to that, or they fight against it.
Increased global challenges or online competition sounds kind of nice.
Yes,
That's
maybe.
cool.
That was the third
Yo,
point.
while we're on that topic, go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah.
I'll bring it up after if I need to.
No, that was the third thing I was going to get at. Was they did not say how, but again, in a little vague paragraph, they said they want to increase the amount of online competitions. Now, the thing that and they specifically said as a way of earning points. Now, the thing that my lawyer brain kind of tripped me off on there is they did not say increase the number of global challenges. They said increase the number of online competitions. So does that mean hypothetically down the line we're going to get maybe some extra tournament that also rewards points, that has its own champion points and best finish limits?
Oh.
Probably not, but the language doesn't exclude that possibility.
They've done that in the past. We've had Players' Cups, and I think I saw some rumblings about that. That would be a cool way to fight against the wallet warrioring, right? Is if we had a Players' Cup that was just like an international payout.
See, yeah, we could spend a lot more time on this because the fundamental problem with online tournaments like that is ghosting.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
well, they have ways to fight against that.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, Hearthstone fights against it is one that I know of because it's a game that you can play on your PC. And when they did it during what's it called, the online era, you had to record yourself while playing.
We'll
Also
use
for
the anti-cheating software that they made me use to take the writing portion of the LSAT, where it makes you take a scan of the room you're in to make sure no.
Turnitin.com.
Turn it.
No, turn it in. Yeah, I got AI generated Pokemon turns.
Yeah, sorry, your lead was very ChatGPT 6S.
Yeah, only ChatGPT would lead Calyrex Ice and Ditto.
Yeah,
The GCs are listed under online competition in the game, so it could be that. But you do make a point that they're not the same wording on the document.
I'm very glad you painted it that way, Jacob, and I'm glad that your lawyer brain is so beautiful and has so many wriggles in it. So my question too is also, can they make the global challenges better? Can they improve on the global challenges? Can we get Terra? Can we get Terra information in the game? Can they code that in? Can they patch that in? Or can we have a website that we log into, and when we queue up into somebody, we can see their team sheet? Is there something that we can do to make the global challenges, with the amount of points that they're giving, like a more viable experience? Like, can it be the same game that we're playing on the actual circuit? Additionally, can it not be on regional weekends? So that way you aren't forced to try and play 3 tournaments at the same time. Or, well, not 3 anymore, but because you used to have to play on 2 cards to be optimal about it. But
I'm hoping at least part of it just means there's going to be more than 3 GCs, and you have a BFL of 3, but there are, I don't know, 6 something. So where that's the fact there are regional weekends is less impactful. I'm hoping that's what it means. I don't really have any expectation for it, but that's what I'm hoping for.
We know there.
You know, I would the BFL for the GCs is now 3, which is insane.
Yes.
I will say, Dan, given that they explicitly stated that there will be more online events meant to generate points, at the minimum, it would be that there will be more than 3 GCs and we'll have the BFL of 3.
I'm keeping my expectations low for my own sake. I do think it's reasonable to think that there's going to be more than 3 GCs based on the wording.
And as to what you said, Justin, about this idea that maybe we'd have some browser-based thing, I get that would display Team Sheet because I'm pretty skeptical that they'll do any update for Scarlet and Violet now that we have gotten our last wave of DLC and our epilogue beyond just coding in raid dens or whatever. I suppose that the initial argument would be, well, why would they design the GC in a way that you're forced to use an extraneous device, especially one that isn't, a Nintendo product if you use your computer? But there is precedent in the past for them having some kind of browser-based system like that. Wasn't that? I mean, this was actually I've never played a Gen 5 game, so I could be getting this wrong. But wasn't that the way the Dream Radar worked? It was a web game.
Oh, it was not a web game. You played it on your DS.
You played it on your DS. I thought it was browser based.
You purchased a $5 app and then you played the most horrendous. I play competitive Pokemon, so I want Pokemon to like me. The most beautiful, incredible presentation of Pokemon fun that you could
You're
ever
allowed to
have
dislike
outside
bad
of the main
things.
series game. Dream Radar sucked. I used a Dream Radar Tornadus at Knoxville, and it was cool that I got to use that. But yeah, no, not a web app. It was not a web thing, not anything like that. You actually played it on your DS and then transferred the data directly into your game.
Yeah, I don't know if there's necessarily a precedent for using a additional device, a laptop or whatever. I mean, but you can already have an advantage in global challenges by using damage calculators, right? And like having a notebook in front of you with damage calcs and matchup notes and stuff like that. There's scouting networks that you can build. You can do tons of things intangibly, like not in the software, to enhance your chances for global challenges. Not saying that everybody does that or that that's like the only way that you can succeed, but I don't think it's a bad idea to fight against the need to do that, because if anything, you're leveling the playing field a lot more by we've seen over the past few years what open information can do for the rookies in this game. So for people to pop off in a global challenge, I wouldn't be opposed to like even just the most basic thing where like we have Terra, like we know what our opponent's Terra is.
Mm-hmm. And my understanding is there is something programmed into the game where you can see the Terra. Am I making that up? Is that a thing that
I have not seen that?
I thought there was, and they had that weird spectator mode for one of the Asian tournaments.
That is spectator mode, right? That's different than playing the game.
Sure,
right?
But like the technology to display the team preview with the thing is there. I will say though, we do have some breaking news, by which I mean there was a tweet from Play Pokemon approximately 6 minutes ago. I'm just gonna read
VGC's
this.
canceled.
VGC's canceled, and they blamed Justin. All right, so I'm gonna read this out loud.
I was trying to react to me.
Thank you, everyone, for your feedback to the changes to be implemented in the upcoming 2025 competitive season. Evolving our competitive structure is an ongoing process, and we value our community's sentiment and suggestions. In the meantime, please keep providing us with your thoughts. We look forward to continuing to mature the competitive ecosystem in order to provide the best experience possible for our players, fans, and spectators. So they're saying they heard us. Does that mean the 2025 season is going to be different?
This is honestly more the same day that we complained. They're responding. This is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life.
I genuinely
was expecting to be waiting until late July.
I genuinely think this discussion is the most positive anybody's been about the changes online. So I'm not surprised they felt the need to say something.
Twitter is angry about it. Yes, and they should be, right? Like, there are some very gross things about Top X when you're used to bar.
Yes.
Like, Justin and I have tried to downplay it because we know, like, okay, it's good to reward people with a strong competitive spirit. Like, I want more people to attend Worlds that are attending all the tournaments they attend with the intent to win. That sounds sick.
Mm-hmm.
But man, there are a lot of things that feel terrible about the structure that people are right to complain about.
Yeah, we could have done that, as I said, with the artificial limited invites, which is just making the bar like the 1,000 or 1,100. And I don't want to like go into pulling up the spreadsheet and diving into all the numbers, but I tried to do some calculations on the existing CP sheet that we had from last season, and it looked like the bar for NA would have been around like the 1,100, maybe 1,150 mark for top 75 without the auto invites being removed. And that actually makes a big difference, especially towards the bottom fringes, because like the next 10 slots down was like it went all the way down to like 950. So that's like a huge difference. And that was to account for the CP change, the payout changes, the BFLs, and the local and everything. Like I just plugged it all in. I looked at the numbers off of what everybody was placing. It would effectively, have been like a 1,000 to 1,100 point bar. And that would give you 75, but people would know at least this is what I have to get to. And that would boost participation naturally. Dan is right. We talked about the fact that that creates a level of uncertainty, but you can be stricter. You can say 1,200. You know what I mean? Because if you put it outside of that threshold of like, okay, it's really, really hard. Here's what I would have to do to get there. You're not, making it so that people are fighting against each other at the fringes in that 65 to 75 range. You're at least saying like, okay, this is the amount of tournaments I can go to. It's going to be really hard. It'll still create that sensation of, oh, here's what I have to do to get my invite. But it'll still at least be like outside of the reach of like, yeah, I don't even know if I can go to that many tournaments. And some people might also say like halfway through the season, like, all right, I'm just playing for fun at this point. Like I got 300 CP. Probably only going to NAIC. And, again, I don't think that's going to dissuade the extremely elite people from going to a lot of tournaments or just going to enough to win. I mean, look at Wolf. Wolf was one of them, probably the most consistent player all season. Maybe Aurelian. Wolf won regionals, got second at Pittsburgh, got top 16 at EUIC, and then got top 32 at NAIC. That's five tournaments, 5 total tournaments, and would have had like 1,800 points in the next CP structure and been like top 16, top 30, top 16, top 20. There's plenty of other players that had ridiculously good seasons, even without their locals, with the adjustments to the BFLs and the shared BFL that like Alberto had a great season, Ugarte had a great season, like doesn't change the top echelons that much. And it doesn't really move that much at the fringes other than saying, okay, you can't be in Colorado and get 400 points from locals. It's just a different way of doing it. The emphasis is on the majors. And maybe people, again, behaviorally will change, because if you have to go to multiple internets to compete, if there's 75 spots, you have to go to 3 internets, or you have to go to 2 internets and 5 regionals to cover for like maybe one bad tournament. And you have to perform at all of them. And you're competing against everybody else who, you might be fighting against somebody that went to 10 tournaments, 10 majors. So it's much different. And I think that they could have artificially done like achieved this. And I wouldn't be opposed to fighting for something like, within their bounds. Like, hey, let's just change it to a 1,000 CP bar. Let's change it to an 1,100 or 1,200 bar. It'll practically have the same effect based off of the numbers that we have.
And having the same effect with a bar is very valuable. Something I talk about a lot when I'm talking with people. I know I've talked about this with all of you here. Is this idea of who it is you're exactly competing against. I have my philosophy for a very long time has been that people can have a self versus self philosophy, where the idea is that you are trying to be better than you were a day ago, a week ago. And there are people that have a self versus other philosophy, where it's about comparing yourself to others. And that is, in my opinion, I think pretty commonly said to be a little bit more toxic, right? Because comparing yourself to others, everyone's circumstances are different. And having a hard cap, a leaderboard essentially, as opposed to having a bar, is going to inherently create this self versus other philosophy for people, which just leads to, especially for those who are trying to compete and are maybe, towards the bottom end of people that have a chance of succeeding, just in terms of how many tournaments they can go to or how their finishes are, it's going to create some unnecessary antagonism, right? If I get 999 points and someone else gets 1,001, my first, and I don't qualify with this 1,000-point bar, my thought is, oh, well, at that one regional I threw because I made a really stupid misplay, so now I know for next time. That's just naturally I'm thinking of what I could have done better, because it doesn't matter how many other people succeeded. Whereas in a 75 bar, if Justin gets 75th and I get 76th, I go, I'm mad because I'm worse than Justin. And
No, that wouldn't even happen because I would throw. I'm too compassionate. I'd be like, Jacob, you can go play Worlds, bro. I have other stuff to do.
Oh my god.
that would be worse, I think, for
If
me.
it happens-
Justin, if it wasn't in Hawaii and you thought you were going, you would be cutthroat.
No, I'm cut.
In
I
in
am
the
still
most
cutthroat
loving,
what I
like,
want to be.
I know that you are a competitor and that you want this and that you believe that you would have a shot at winning Worlds no matter how badly you did this season.
I have
Jacob would have to beat you
Look,
badly.
Possibly.
respectively, I have a lot of friendly scoops in my career. I owe you one, or you're
I'm
gonna
the
fight
worst.
harder here.
I'm the worst. I don't scoop to anyone. I've only done it once. I'm a bad person.
Not that I advise it. I'm just saying it's a good feeling sometimes. You know, like you know what, this guy is on a
Give
good
something
tournament run. Scooping to somebody that makes top 8 and does really well, like that's a good feeling. Not gonna lie.
Hmm.
You know, carry my wishes. You can do it, bro. Also, just losing to somebody better than you and being like, bro, please win the tournament, which I've been in that situation too many times. Sometimes, you know, it's fine to have somebody else carry the finish line. But yeah, all right. So we talked about the mentality around, you know, having the limited invites versus, you know, maybe like an artificially creating that effect with just a high bar. I would say for now, like, you know, we do want to increase the accessibility. I think having more invites is okay. Having too many invites is a threshold that, like, I feel like it's wrong to fight. It's hard to say that publicly. Like, yes, there is a situation where there's too many invites.
I don't think there's such a thing as like too many. Well, okay, there's such a thing logistically that there's too many. Because Worlds is a celebration of Pokemon. Like, I think everyone should be able to go that wants to go a lot.
Well, I do think that there is like an actual problem with too many invites in terms of like metagame and like what
Yeah, it's
preparation
true.
for
It's
the
true.
world, like the mentality that we talked about, where people that don't take it seriously, right? Like if you play laissez-faire, that is different from having a 50-person invitational style Worlds where every single person there is playing like their life depends on it.
And the metagame is different for that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? It's like everyone is it's really strange to go to an international championship right now, actually, and play a portion of your rounds against people that are just bringing what they thought was strong and like they know is good. I'm sorry to interrupt. We need to be wrapping up. But it's like it's weird to do that and then play the other portion of your rounds against people that are like intensely metagaming and like are up to date on all the most recent trends and have like 3 accounts in top 50 in Showdown or something. Like, it is very strange to go back and forth, and the way you need to play and build your team is different depending on which person you fight. So it's like you get the highest quality, most like intense mind gamey stuff when everyone is doing that or no one is doing it.
Yeah, and like it's weird too in a game like Pokemon. I'm sure it happens in other trading card games too, or other like some RNG or probability dependent stuff. But it is an awful feeling, especially when you're like really, really gunning to win the whole thing, to lose to somebody that like was just there with like the craziest like anti-meta thing that they could think of, and you know as soon as you lose to them, you're like, all right, we'll see how far that one goes. And that's an elitist take to have, but like knowing that somebody's gonna go 4-5 after losing your 4-0 match is very frustrating. And it's like a frustrating feeling. I'm not saying that it's like wrong to do that at a tournament, but I do think it's right to incentivize against that. You know, everybody that goes to these tournaments should be thinking about that type of thing. I'm talking from my personal experience too. I
will say I personally probably would never say that about the anti-meta player out loud. But we've all thought it.
Well, it happens all the time.
It does happen all the time.
Oh my goodness! It happens at locals.
You
it
fight
happens at
someone, they have
regionals.
freaking like 6 steel types against your Xerneas, and you don't have it's one of the formats where you don't have a Groudon. It's like, all right, I lose, but you're gonna lose to Kyogre. Like,
Yeah, I mean it's an unfun feeling to feel like you can't play the game. And it's also, you know, it's a team building flaw too. But like, especially with rotating formats, that's a whole topic that maybe we could go into separately. But the main engine of that discussion that I was trying to like at least just close out on is I like the idea of incentivizing everybody that goes to this tournament is taking it as seriously as possible. It makes the quality of the games better. It makes the experience better. It creates much more positive emotional energy too. Some of the best sets that I've had are sets that I've lost and been like, wow, I am just so blown away by how you've played. Like you played incredible. I played incredible. You played more incredibly, and that's beautiful to me. So like I like that stuff. I don't like that ulterior situation where, you know, people are like not necessarily lazy about it. I say laissez-faire. And I like that, you know, having mechanisms in place to disincentivize that. And
Yeah.
one of the ways to do that is to have less people at the tournament, technically.
Absolutely, and I will say, even the set that made me want to get good at Pokemon was actually a set that I lost. I played 2022. I played against Wolf round 1 of NAIC, and I had
Just world
and I
champions.
looked at it. World champion round 1, 2022, 2024. It's at 2026. We'll see. Maybe I'll play against
Yeah.
We'll see. Maybe I'll play you round 1 in 2026 Toller.
Yeah, it's just going downhill, I guess.
No.
And Paul and Wolf are great, but then there's me.
And then we got into team preview and I was like, wow, this matchup's great. Maybe I can actually beat Wolf. And then I got my ass kicked and I was like, oh, there's a lot more to this than I thought there was. But we've been going for a while. And I don't want to keep you guys captive. So let's get some closing thoughts from everybody real quick. I guess I'll start us off. Are these changes great? Am I happy about this document? No, I'm not. And the things I am excited about are speculative, which is never a good thing because they could mess that up still too. That being said, I love playing Pokemon. I am too stubborn for my own good, and I want to see how far I can get at this game. So it's not stopping me from playing and having fun with it.
Yeah, I'm of a similar mindset. I don't like the limit on the invites. We'll do what we can. Hopefully we fight against it, and hopefully they change it in the future. I still think that, like, you know, if you only go to 2 regionals and a couple locals, good. Awesome. Go play your heart out. Go do your absolute best. Go win. It's an amazing feeling to put a lot of hard work into the game and get rewarded for that hard work at every level of the game. And if you can do more with it because you have more tournaments near you or you have some extra disposable income to go to a couple of events, the internets are amazing experiences. They're in crazy cool cities, they're different cultures, and it's again around tons of people that love and are compassionate about this game and your efforts and your labors, and it's an experience that nothing else has ever come close to in my life, even when trying to find something that does that. So again, I always encourage people to try and do it, try and be optimistic about it, try and be the best player you can be. I'm rooting for all of you except for the people that show up with these stupid crazy teams to NAIC, fighting for your I didn't say anything. I take that one back. I'm positive.
No,
good job, guys.
Yeah.
We did so well for so long.
I got Rockslide flinched out of NAIC last year.
I gotta be a better team builder, is what I mean. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. I gotta grow in new and exciting ways that I didn't anticipate going to this tournament. On extending the points that have been made so far, right? Like, I am thrilled that they seem to have a perspective in mind on the lines of, like, we need non-worlds incentives for this game. Both because it's not reasonable to keep growing worlds ad infinitum and then be like, well, now that we have the 2,000 person world championships, we finally accommodated all of the growth. Like, I am excited about non-world incentives. I am not excited about Top X. I don't think Top X is a great format. I think everyone agrees that that's true. I think there are ways of facilitating it that don't feel like you're screwing over your friends, or formats for Worlds qualification that don't feel like you're screwing over your friends. So that part sucks. I'm excited for expanded events in other ways. I'm excited for, I don't know, locals not feeling like I need to attend 6 and therefore travel 2 hours on a random weekend a lot of the time because I'm already traveling a lot to attend bigger tournaments. I think everyone listening to this who's not thinking about getting a Worlds invite, I think you should expand your mind. This is not me being like, I'm good and you're bad. So therefore you shouldn't expect to get a Worlds invite. Actually, to be completely honest with you, I think there's a pretty low probability I get a Worlds invite next year because I'm in principle finishing my PhD. So I will be very busy getting that done, but we'll see. I'll try. But I think it will be healthy to look at Pokemon as more than just a game about the World Championship, and instead look at Pokemon as a game that is about every tournament that you attend being something worth winning or trying to win and receiving the joy that way. And I think that's also a more fulfilling way to play the game because at the end of the day, right, this is a hobby we play for fun. So, and it's a competitive hobby, which is awesome. There's so few of those that you can do in this way. So, like, I hope that everyone can find a way to play for fun, even when the structure for Worlds specifically, which everyone has been chasing only Worlds for 2 years. I hope the structure is sufficient to incentivize people to think about other stuff.
Pokemon's still just as fun as it was in 2014 and 2015.
Yes,
as it is
I'm
now.
always an optimist about this stuff. I don't complain about formats. I don't complain about structures. I just try to enjoy it the best I can.
He just complains about me.
Right, how about you, Dan? Any closing thoughts?
Yes, I mean, it's fairly similar. I I'm less happy about the about the structure today than I was yesterday. But like that doesn't mean I'm gonna stop playing. That doesn't mean I'm not gonna stop. Like I very much enjoy the game. I enjoy the community. I'll keep going to events. And maybe it will result in more of a I don't know. I'll see. I want to keep the pressure on me to an extent because that's how like I think I'll be a better player, and I want to be a better player, and I want to keep getting better at this game. But we'll see how many events I go to. It should still be a lot because I enjoy seeing everyone and I love the community. But I don't know. We've got a ways to go to grow, and I hope the game does. And I have belief in everyone making it better and making the best of what it is. We'll see how it goes. I can't say I'm like delighted about the changes, but
Yeah.
oh well.
Well,
I'm
it's weird
still,
to have.
I don't. Yeah, I feel like we've been fairly positive, and like that's good. But also like I'm not gonna. I like the circuit of the previous season better, even if I do acknowledge that I need to change. I don't think the changes were the best. But
Thank
It-
you
it sucks.
for having us on the
Yeah,
BGC
you.
support group call. That's what we were doing. Guys, let's be positive. Let's huddle up.
Let's be
We can do
positive. Let's
this.
end positively.
We can have a good
Yeah.
time anyway. We'll still be at the same tournaments.
yes.
All right, everybody.
And I do think people should still go to tournaments. The game is still really fun. The community is really great. Just because you get a Worlds invite does not mean you should stop playing Pokemon. As much as I think we have room to improve, I don't love these changes. That does not mean you should stop playing the game. Worlds is not.
I will say for a lot of people it's like whiplash because we spent 2 years where the only incentive was Worlds and it was like in principle doable air quotes, although still very hard. And now it's like they're switching to be like stop incentivizing yourself with Worlds, you idiots. Like
Get good.
how am I supposed to feel?
Well, I think I've held you all captive in this little stream long enough. Thank you guys for coming, for sharing your thoughts. I appreciate it. Thank you to everybody that was watching. It was pretty high view count on average, given how last second this was. But this will be a VOD for members only, and I will be posting an edited version of this up where I make everybody say things that they didn't actually say. Probably either tomorrow or Saturday. So
And that's where the AI is coming.
So Justin, Toller, Dan, thank you so much for giving me so many samples of you making different phonetic sounds. And good night, everybody.
Thanks, Jacob.